Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. As-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. There are warnings against shirk, associating partners with God, throughout the Quran, as it calls shirk the greatest injustice and a grave sin. Of course, we're talking about associating partners with God, shirk, in worship and servitude to God, not associating partner in creation, which even polytheists believed in Allah as the creator. Occasionally, some people ask, while we know we can imagine or perceive the harms of many crimes like murder or stealing, what is the harm of shirk? Our Lord and Creator, who is free of all needs, if someone commits shirk, is there a harm to God? Is there a harm to that person? A harm or harms that one can perceive? Or what is the short-term or long-term effect of shirk? A crime the Quran insists on being the grave injustice. In today's lecture, we will try to answer these questions in both perceived and often non-perceived, yet real levels. Before we begin, let's have a quick definition of shirk. The term shirk, translated as associating partner with God, has a wide connotation in Islam. In addition to the classical meanings such as worshiping idols, statues, or a creation of God, such as an object or a human, like a prophet or a saint, it is also ascribing God's attribute to a person or a thing. For example, we say, God knows the past, present, and future. That is, He's all-knowing. Or God is present everywhere. He is omnipresent. Then we ascribe such attributes to something or someone like a prophet, a saint, an imam, or a statue, and as a result appeal to them for help and or perform acts of worship to them, such as praying and sacrificing. Then there are more subtle and functional forms of shirk, which are not so obvious. These could include attachment to something or someone who takes up one's full attention and dedication, so much so that the person cannot live without. This is a hidden shirk that can lead man every which way as man follows and obeys his or her idol with full attention and preoccupation. The Quran calls it whims and desires. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ أَفَأَنْتَ تَكُونَ عَلَيْهِ وَكِيلًا. Have you seen the one who takes his own desire as his God? Then would you be responsible for him? The verse is referring to people who submit and surrender to their nafs, which is the most prevalent and function of all shirks. And the second part implies even the Prophet could not help such people, hence not responsible for them. That is why attachment to other than God is not only a form of shirk, but also disastrous. A person can love someone or something, but can live without. Attachment, on the other hand, occurs when one cannot live without. On the opposite side, we have the declaration of faith in Islam that says there is no God, no deity but Allah, which is the essence of Islam. It means that God has no partner, sharik. He exists by himself. This is expressed by the Arabic word tawheed, oneness and unity, which in the Islamic context means the oneness of God. This is a fundamental doctrine encompassing the oneness of God in every sense of the expression, harmonious with the view that human religions began with Tawheed, and some ended with polytheism as a later development. The basic mission of all the prophets and messengers who made their appearance at intervals in this world was to lead people away from the worship of many gods back to worship of the one God. In other words, to turn them away from worshiping the creatures toward worshiping and reverence for the Creator. After this brief introduction, let's proceed with harms of shirk, that which the Quran calls the grave sin. There are, of course, obvious reasons, many of which are mentioned in the Quran. The main reason we will be looking at today goes a bit deeper into fundamental roots, such as psychological and spiritual state of mind. To get there, we begin with a couple of examples and then dig deeper. To start, we note that we have what we call zahir, what's apparent or outward, and what we call batin, what is not apparent or is inward or within our conscious. Right now, you're looking at my zahir, but you do not have much idea about my batin, what goes on inside me. What happens to zahir is usually short term as its effects go away rapidly. However, it has a long-term effect on the batin and may never go away. As an example, let's say if you commit injustice by slapping someone hard a couple of times without any reason whatsoever, your action takes no more than a second or two, and the only trace of it is a momentary mark on that person's face, which will go away after a couple of hours. No other zahir or apparent harm. However, your action then goes to that person's batin, his conscious. That person then feels humiliated, feels shamed. He will feel you have insulted him, and it will remain in his batin as long as he lives or has his memory, and will stay angry regarding this event. Hence, the 2-second event will become a 50-60 years memory. Another example, let's say you bought a used car for a few $1,000s, and one day you drove it to a friend's house to visit him. While you were there for an hour or so, someone came by and stole your car from the street. The action itself took less than a few minutes. And even though you may not have paid a lot of money for that car, plus you can afford to buy another one fairly soon, hence its apparent impact on your life is limited to a few days. You realize 1 minute you owned a car, next minute you did not. However, what happens in zahir enters your batin, hence impacted, and your conscience will not leave you alone and will have long-term effect. You will be upset for a long time. Every time you pass by your friend's neighborhood, it reminds you of what happened in that day, and you will be thinking, you know, I worked hard to make that money, worked overtime or weekends for 6 months, or saved for a year to be able to afford to buy that car, only to be taken away from me within minutes. Without any regard to my time and effort put into buying that car, the thief took it away from me and violated or denied my right of ownership. Without knowing him, you will be angry with him. Hence, what is in the zahir, apparent world, usually is limited to short-term effect, but when it enters the conscious and batin, its impact is deep and long-term. Now, where is man's epicenter? Of course, it is his batin. It is true we live through our zahir as well. We eat, drink, walk, etc. However, the root foundation of man's being, his personality and existence, is his batin. That is why when an event is deeply rooted in his batin, it is much stronger, more precise, and in a subtle world where events have deeper and more permanent effects. Hence, man's being, character, and individuality resides there. Stay with me. Now, what does this character, personality, or individuality say? It says, I am, I exist, I have dignity, and I deserve respect as you have dignity and deserve respect. You have no right to offend my character, my individuality, through any injustice. To whom can I say I am, I exist? To anyone of mankind. I am as you are. You can even say it to a prophet. You can say to him, you are, and of course you are well honored and respected as a prophet. But I do exist as well. I am as well. To whom can I say I am not? To none other than God. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can say to Allah, I can say to him, I belong to you. I am or I exist because of you. That I can say, I do not belong to myself, or I do not exist because of myself, simply because I did not create myself. So in front of all mankind, or all the creation, I am someone, I exist, I have self-worth. It is in front of Allah that I'm not, and I depend on Him, and I owe my existence to Him. Bottom line, I am to Him, and belong to Him, not to myself. يا أيها الناس أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني الحميد. O mankind, it is you who are in need of Allah, and Allah is self-sufficient, the praised. We are in need of Him. He is free of all needs, even our worship. The verse says we all need God without a choice, without exception, determinatively. Mankind needs a support system in dealing with hardships, to survive life's ups and downs. This support system mankind can rely on is Allah Azza wa Jal, who is the creator of all, and everything is in His hand. Now, what does Shirk do? Listen to this carefully. What does it really mean when you ask me to be a mushrik? You are entering or invading my batin, my very person or individuality, and destroying it. You're telling me to bow down to a person, be it a prophet, a saint, an imam, or an idol, who is a creation just like me, and asking me to tell him that I am nothing to him. I do not exist without him. I cannot live without him. You're asking me to humiliate myself, belittle myself, feel insignificant before a creation, not the creator. Hence, this is the beginning of destruction of one's character and dignity, or denying one's individuality and self-worth. This is the true implication of shirk. In addition, just like Tawheed is a system and a way of life, not just a belief, Shirk is a system. Tawheed means knowing and believing in one God first, then worshiping Him alone. One must not only acknowledge God as the Creator and Lord, but also submit to Him, bow down and prostrate to Him, go perform Hajj for Him, sacrifice for Him, give in His cause. There are rituals one must perform for Him. God in Islam is a hands-on God involved in a Muslim's life 24/7. So Tawheed is a system, a way of life. So is Shirk. It's also a system and eventually becomes a way of life. An idol requires a temple, a shrine. It requires ceremonies. It requires rituals. It requires offerings. It requires a mutawalli, one who manages and takes care of the temple or shrine or wherever the idols reside, which could also be one's heart. An idol requires a command center, which could also be the mutawalli. Needs another person who serves in the idol's place of residence. Yet idols need worshippers, those who attach to him, submit to him, and do as they want them to do, which comes in a form of command through the mutawalli, who could be a man, a cleric, or a priest, or one's own desires. You do it so this idol whom you have chosen to worship will be pleased with you. Just imagine how Shirk facilitates all the investment man makes toward idols, ranging from his own time, effort, and money, all the way to huge dedications and endowments people will make. Whether through an internal idol or an external idol, Shirk is indeed a system and consumes man's thoughts, preoccupation, time, effort, and wealth. One submits to such an idol in all humility, acknowledging, I'm nothing without you. I'm at your service 24/7. Take me wherever you wish. All in words and in actions. The more you submit and humble yourself before this idol, the closer you get to him, and the more this idol will preoccupy your thoughts and demand. It will take you into a world of lies in which you bow down and worship an idol who is a creation just like you, nothing more. He has nothing from himself, and all he has is what Allah has given to him. And then, how does he pay you back for all that you've done for him? He took your time, effort, and money. What did you get in return? Weakness in nafs and conscience, humiliation and unworthiness. As the Quran says in chapter 19, وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ آلِهَةً لِيَكُونُوا لَهُمْ عِزًّا كَلَّا سَيَكْفُرُونَ بِعِبَادَتِهِمْ وَيَكُونَ عَلَيْهِمْ ضِدًّا. And they have taken for worship gods other than Allah to give them power and glory. Indeed, no, they will renounce their worship and turn against them. Some people thought, and still do, that with our background and what we've done and the sins, we have no way to access God. Hence, we take intermediaries so they can get us close to God, give us power and glory before God. In those days, they were idols, and to some extent, they still are. But also today, these are the clerics and priests of some sort. They want to get their izzah with God through these human or statue idols. Allah rejects it in this verse with the emphasis on kalla. Indeed, no, these gods will be adversaries against them. The Quran says in chapter 35, مَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ الْعِزَّةَ فَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ جَمِيعًا. He who wants might and honor, all the might and honor belongs to Allah. No one gains might and honor by worshiping other than God. Not in this life and not in the next. In fact, these idols will turn against them in the last day and say, we reject your worship to us. Anyone seeking honor and might in nafs must submit only to Allah Azza wa Jal because He is the source. When I say to Allah, I do not exist without you, I have said the truth, because whatever I possess is from him. And with truth, I will not be humiliated and undignified. It is a lie when I say it is to other than God and submit to him. وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَكَأَنَّمَا خَرَّ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. He who has associated others with Allah is like he who falls from heaven, from the sky. Allah contrasts the treacherous life of a polytheist to that of a person who falls aimlessly from the sky and perishes only to be picked on by the vultures blown away by the wind to some unknown place where danger is waiting for him. That is a life of an idolater. This is why we read in the Quran, as Luqman says to his son, لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. Associate none with Allah. Indeed, associating others with Allah is the greatest injustice, highest wrongdoing. Shirk is not only rejecting the truth, it is also humiliating and corrupting. Generally speaking, anything that preoccupies man so much that it becomes his final goal, it becomes his idol. Hence, believing in God and these idols at the same time then becomes a shirk. These idols can be wealth, power, politics, a person, and so forth. Can a monotheist, muwahhid, be wealthy without being a mushrik? Of course, as long as one does not lose his head and his soul for his wealth. If by earning wealth his final goal is to spend it in the path of God and give it to help others for the sake of God, while he enjoys it himself, while keeping in mind his wealth is from Allah, who can be taken away at any moment, since he is not attached to it. This is not shirk, but also can earn rewards for him. So the intention and what goes on in his batin makes all the difference. Now, can one really commit injustice against Allah, who is free of all needs? Of course not. As Allah says in chapter 3, وَمَنْ يَنْغَلِبْ عَلَىٰ عَقَبَيْهِ فَلَنْ يَضُرَّ اللَّهَ شَيْئًا. And he who turns on his heels will never harm Allah at all. Meaning, even if one loses his belief in God after someone's passing, be it the prophet's passing or anyone else, or any reason such as negative influence of a disbeliever, etc., he should know he will not harm Allah one bit. The verse ends with, soon Allah will reward those who are thankful, meaning those who appreciate the gift of guidance and act on it, God will reward them. Therefore, an injustice to Allah in reality is injustice to oneself, first and foremost, then injustice to those who surround him, and to the mankind if he invites and supports others to shirk as well. Because he's telling them to give their time, their effort, their wealth, their life to the greatest lie of all, that which brings abjection and humility before a creation of God instead of submission to the Creator himself. This is why Islam insists so much on Tawheed, which is the focal point of the Quran. Otherwise, as far as Allah is concerned, we cannot harm him other than having committed a grave sin, a grave wrongdoing before him. Because as the one Creator and Lord to be worshipped alone, he has a right upon us. And by shirk, that right due to him is taken away, which again has implication on us, not Allah Azza wa Jal. وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ افْتَرَى إِثْمًا عَظِيمًا. And he who associates others with Allah has certainly fabricated a great sin. This verse summarizes all the things we've been talking about, one of which is loving someone or something more than God. Respecting and honoring one thing or someone more than God. As the Quran says in chapter 2, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. And yet, among the people are those who take other than Allah as equal to Him. They love them as they should love Allah. But those who believe are stronger in love for Allah. Of course, such injustice and a grave sin ensures one a place in hellfire. On the contrary, Tawheed is pride, freedom of self, nafs, and freedom from all shackles that enslave man and lead him to submit to the one who is merciful, one who is all-knowing, all-wise, and the one who is the owner of our existence, all of which is in touch with the reality, meaning I worship the one and only, the one who created me, sustains me, everything I have is from Him, and I am nothing without Him. Then you look at true monotheists and their temperament throughout the history and see how they dedicated themselves to God. You know the story of an emissary in early Islam who was sent to one of Roman emperor's governors carrying a message. When he got there, they told him that when he goes before the governor, he must bow down to him, same way he does in his prayer to God. He immediately declined. They thought, well, if he does not do it, the required formalities or the protocols are disregarded, etc. So they came up with an idea that they take him through a shorter door, which was on the side of the main door in the governor's court. So then he would be forced to bring his head down as he enters to avoid his, hitting his head. Hence, sort of bow down to the governor as he enters. The emissary realized what they were doing, so he entered with his back backward, so he does not bow down to the governor. This is how dedicated and persistent early Muslims were. They bowed down to none other than Allah Azza wa Jalla. Human nobility and benevolence is very important here. A person who takes his own wants and desires as his deity and just blindly follows it, let it take him in every direction, has no regards to self-worth, self-respect. He cannot dignify himself and rise above it and reach his human potential. Beyond the classical shirk, which is worshipping the idols and other humans, this is a form of shirk that many people are affected by today. Man's wants and desires and short-lived indulgences have enslaved his intellect, his thoughts, his time, his effort, and his money. He has no regard to his own human potential in nobility, dignity, and benevolence. Just like a worm that rolls in mud and dirt, enjoying the moment before it is stepped on and wiped away from pages of existence, there are those of mankind who are so preoccupied with these short-lived desires and indulgences and want to roll in the moment, indulge in it, and eventually disappear as life steps on them and they disappear from pages of history. However, a true worshipper of God says, I will not sell out myself and my dignity for anything. Allah has created me for a higher purpose. Hence, I will not surrender to every sin and wrongdoing, so that I am humiliated, dishonored, or disgraced. وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. And when they pass by what is vain, they pass by with dignity. They see themselves above vain talks and desires. It is these category of people God honors. At the end of the day, it is about getting to know Allah, recognizing Him as our Creator and Lord and Sustainer, then to worship Him alone and submit to Him alone, never associate any partners or equals to Him, which is all easy if we really get to know Him. To acknowledge that everything we have is from Him and everything belongs to Him. Hence, we turn to Him and appeal to Him alone for His help. Acknowledge that He created us for a purpose and that we belong to Him and our return is to Him. Without such belief, one can fall into the Shirk trap, which is the biggest lie of all, as it leads us to our doom in this life and the next. Furthermore, belief in one God gives the believers confidence, for they trust in God and believe that nothing can happen unless God wills it. Life and death are entirely in His hands. Hence, they remain content because they believe that power, wealth, and success come from God alone. He gives them to whom He thinks fit. Tawheed thus brings about a unique blend of submission to God and human dignity and freedom. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.